I want to hear cannons. Outfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18, dropping Gannon, looking Gannon, throws up with the head to the side, at the 30, Derek Brooks 30, Brooks to the 25, 20, Derek Brooks all the way. There it is, the dagger's in, we're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go, fire them, keep on firing them, keep on firing them.
We are back live with a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from Mr. Bucs Nation, James Hill, is back on the podcast, filling in for the missing Evan Wanish. And today, we will take a look ahead at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers matchup against the Houston Texans. Both teams 3-4, and while the Texans have a little bit more positive momentum this time of the season, the Bucs just looking to turn things around. Losers of their last 3 games. Todd Bowles has said that you don't want these losses to snowball, but it's hard to argue that things are not already snowballing with 3 straight losses. But the Bucs obviously have also had a lot of time off these past couple of weeks, so you hope that that's enough to get them right, get them healthy, and get them ready for a win here in front of this crowd and, of course, the Houston Texans this weekend. James, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be filling in for Evan. And yeah, you kind of said it. This is really an important game for the Bucs to get back on track. They've lost 3 straight now. All of them have been, obviously not the best losses in the world in terms of just overall efficiency for the team. You go from 3-1 to 3-4. And right now, this is the most important game for the Bucs this year up to this point, right? I'm going to tell you what, 4-4 looks a whole heck of a lot better than 3-5. So you also have the Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints playing some very, very winnable games who are already ahead of the Buccaneers and the NFC South standings right now. So yeah, I would go as far as say this is a must win for the Bucs.
Yeah, quite the understatement there, as this NFC South division that we have talked about is still wide open. So even if you fall to 3-5 with some favorable matchups over the next few weeks, I still think the Bucs shouldn't be too far out of that NFC South division race, but obviously looking to get that lead back from the Atlanta Falcons. Now, before we talk about the game this week, we did want to talk about how the NFL trade deadline has come and gone on October 31st, 4 p.m. That was the deadline. And nothing happened. The Bucs did not buy or sell any pieces, but we did get a spicy report, courtesy of the New York Post, I guess subtweeted by Rick Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times. Apparently, the New York Jets were one of the teams who were calling teams trying to make some trades happen, especially at the veteran wide receiver position, because come to find out, the Jets called Tampa Bay and the Raiders multiple times about trying to get a hold of guys like Mike Evans and Davante Adams, just to be turned away and said that those teams are not interested in trading those guys. Now, the details of when this report initially came out is what people have been going back and forth on, because I had seen Stroud mention that this was back in August, but it's still newsworthy, and I guess it is still evergreen, and I guess it reinforces the thought process the Buccaneers have at this time of the season with the trade deadline. Even though they are 3-4, they're still not sellers, and they are looking forward to Mike Evans at least finishing what may possibly be his final season in Tampa. But I do think the Bucs not moving him at all at the trade deadline definitely opens the door for that conversation a little bit more here at the end of the season about possibly retaining Mike Evans.
Couple of things, right? So firstly, I had actually made a video about this, Rhett, on my channel. We talked about it before we went live. One, I read an article published October 31st, 2023, Halloween night at 9:18 p.m. by Brian Costello of the New York Post. Jets asked about Davante Adams, Mike Evans before NFL trade deadline. So, I mean, really, it's subjective. Who are you going to believe? You're going to believe the Bucs beat reporters, Stroud, Almond and all them, or are you going to believe the New York Post's beat reporters and Brian Costello? I don't know. It's subjective. You do whatever you want to do. People who are in with the Jets say that the Jets were asking before the NFL trade deadline. People who are in with the Bucs are saying that they were asking at the start of the season. Whatever. Point being, is that the Jets did ask about Mike Evans at some point in time, possibly multiple points in time, depending on who you want to believe. And the Bucs said no. And there's a couple of takeaways for me from that, Rhett. One is that if this did happen before the trade deadline, this still speaks to me that the Buccaneers are committed to winning football games this year. Right. They're not just going to be punting on the season. They're not going to be, selling and looking to move guys and lose some games and whatnot. They still want to win football games. And I know some people are going to say, like, oh, well, what does it matter? Well, it matters because Todd Bowles wants to keep his job. Right. So he's going to still want to win some football games. Jason Light still certainly wants to win some football games. So they want to keep their guys. And this is another indication that that is the case. Second thing is that this is also a strong indication that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers want Mike Evans to stick around. And that's not really surprising either. Right. I don't think that me and Rhett have to tell everybody watching this podcast episode that Mike Evans is very good at football. And that, yeah, he's a good guy to have on your football team. So even though he is in the last year of his deal, even though there has been some speculation there, the Buccaneers have, refused any offers that have been made on Evans, which is an indication that they want him to be around. Those are a couple of takeaways that I had from these reports coming out, regardless of whatever the timeline may look at. Those are some pretty healthy takeaways that I have coming away from that. And it shows that the Bucs do want to win some football games, and it also shows that they want Mike Evans to stick around, Rhett.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and call Jason Light a liar, but he has said since the beginning of this entire situation that he does look forward to having Mike Evans back in Tampa Bay, even beyond this season. And the fact that they did not move him at the deadline not only shows you where their expectations are with this team for the rest of the season, but where their expectations are on a potential new contract for Mike Evans. So a positive update, at least having him finish out the rest of this season. And also just a good update that the Bucs are not in a situation where, like we had talked about, if this team has one or two less wins, they could potentially be talking about selling off more pieces than they did. But this is the year to find out what this roster is capable of, and they are looking to do just that. Let's get into the injury report and talk about who's going to be in and out for this week's game. We just spent a lot of time talking about Mike Evans. This was a rest week for Big Mike. No practice at all for him this week, but I mean, when you're in year 10 and you are a caliber player that Mike Evans is, especially a bona fide wide receiver one in the NFL, there's some guys in the NFL that can go a full week without practice and still go out there and perform. So for Mike Evans, he's been looking to get healthy because he popped up on the injury report for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I think having a lot of the breaks that the Bucs have is going to help him, but should expect him to give it a go this coming Sunday. The only two players confirmed out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are left guard Matt Filer, so Aaron Stinney going to be starting for the second week in a row at that left guard spot, and defensive lineman Logan Hall. Now, we can, I guess, pick what side of the football you wanted to talk about, because Aaron Stinney going to be the conversation filling in at left guard, and then with the absence of Logan Hall at the defensive line, I can only think of one guy, and that is more snaps for Kalijah Kancey, which I am always in favor of. So what side of the trenches do you want to cover here first?
Let's start with the defensive, just because I feel like that one is definitely not, it's going to sound like weird, but like Kalijah Kancey's already been playing a ton, right? He's already a starter, Rhett, on the defensive line in terms of playing next to Vita Vea and whatnot. So what I think is going to be interesting about this is going to be the overall, play of Will Golston and some other guys are going to be filling in, like Mike Green, maybe getting some more playing time, and maybe even Deidrin Sanat could be getting some more playing time as well. Those are going to be some guys where you take a look at that and see, guys getting more playing time. And also, obviously, Kalijah Kancey is going to be out there more just to have a, more consistency with the offensive line and whatnot. But I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see some of those guys get some more opportunities, see what they can do. Of course, in the case of Will Golston, he's been here before. I think it's like year 10 for him or something along those lines.
Year 11.
Yeah, so even more so to the case. So it's going to be a good thing to see Golston out there. Going to be a good thing to see some more of those younger guys out there that we don't get to see very often. But also, like you said, I'm excited to see Kalijah Kancey. He's had some really good moments whenever he has been out there since coming back from injury. So Definitely good reason to be excited there. And also Vita Vea coming back healthy as well.
Yeah, Vita Vea coming back healthy is going to be a huge factor on that defensive line. We've talked in seasons before about his presence and his ability to open things up for some of the other guys on that defensive line. Now, while we focus on this defensive line, I think that brings us to the pass rush, honestly. Kalijah Cansey, hats off to him, has been playing well. He's been effective. You can notice that he is out there, but even when he is out there, this pass rush just cannot seem to get pressure with 4 down linemen. Shaq Barrett has been underwhelming this season. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka has 3 sacks on the year. Not great, but not where he should be. Vita Vea, for the second season in a row up until this point, leads the team in sacks, which is not a very desirable stat. I mean, Vita Vea is a monster, so we need to give him all the credit in the world, but you definitely don't want a 350-pound D tackle leading your team in quarterback pressures and sacks by this point in the season. But we look at the offensive line for the Houston Texans, and as we dive a little bit more into this Texans team, it's important to note they are not the Texans of years past. I mean, even in 2019, the last time these two teams played, they got the better of Tampa Bay thanks to some offensive interceptions, but realistically, this is a good-looking team, and it's an underrated-looking offense. C.J. Stroud has been playing like one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, not only against the blitz, but he looks like the best rookie out of this class from last year, and he's got the Houston Texans playing maybe not winning football, but winning more than they have been, sitting at a 3-4 record. Dameon Pierce is going to be out at the running back position, so it means Devin Singletary, the former Chicago Bear, former Buffalo Bill, this guy's been a little bit of everywhere, he will step in and play. Nico Collins at wide receiver. Robert Woods will be out, so their number 2 option at wide receiver, another big piece missing on this Houston offense. But those are the 2 biggest players out they're going to have for this game. But the offensive line, this is what I wanted to get around to. At left tackle, you've got Laramie Tunsil, who at one time was the highest paid left tackle in the NFL. Left guard, Titus Howard. Center, Michael Diter. Right guard, Shaq Mason, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer. And then right tackle, George Fant. Now, a lot of people look at Shaq Mason at that guard spot, and they're going to get upset, and they're going to start talking about how the Bucs may have some discrepancies at the guard position ever since moving on from Shaq Mason. But I do think an important tidbit a lot of people seem to forget is that the Bucs only moved on from Shaq Mason because of the cap hell they found themselves in, so they needed some relief in that move, even though in hindsight, not a lot of people are going to be happy about letting a veteran like that go. But I am worried about this pass rush this week. I do think the lack of pressure that we have seen from Tampa Bay, even though he's a rookie quarterback and he's prone to mistakes, C.J. Stroud has been playing well enough that, you know, if you give him enough time, I'm worried he's going to pick us apart this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good line, right? Like, I loved Shaq Mason for the Bucs. I thought he was a very good guy. You've had a lot of different guys in there. Jarrett Patterson's been in there. George Fant has been in there. Laramie Tunsil, we talked about him. You've had a lot of different guys going in a lot of different situations. They've been banged up a little bit. This looks like this is going to be the healthiest the offensive line has been for the Texans. And yes, Dameon Pierce is out. Yes, Robert Woods is out. Tank Dell's been doing some really good things for the Texans now the past few weeks. If you guys are big fantasy football folks, if you know, you know. But, it's just been, I agree, Rhett, like, it's not good that Vita Vea is the top sack guy. Your nose tackle is your top pass rusher right now. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka's got to step up. Shaq Barrett's definitely got to step up. And really just a lot of the other rotational guys, Anthony Nelson, Yaya Diaby, maybe even Cam Gill a little bit. And I think bringing back Kalijah Cansey returning is certainly going to help, right? Like he's only played in 4 games and he's tied for second on quarterback hits this year. Kalijah Cansey is. So that's certainly going to help this pass rush. But we've got to see more. Like I remember talking about it. I'm sure you guys talked about it as well here on the podcast. Like, maybe the Bucs should have been interested in trading for a pass rusher. Like Chase Young was out there. Montez Sweat was out there. Chase Young would have been so cool to see on this defense.
Yeah, for a third round pick. I know that we haven't really supported the narrative of throwing away future picks. And I know a third round pick can potentially still contribute on this Bucs team. But just like you said, they've been missing that. And like even when this defense was good, it always felt like they were missing that one next level pass rusher to really be feared along that D line.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So I mean, like, personally, I would have paid a third round pick for him. For Chase Young, that is. But, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers didn't. It is what it is. And now guys have got to step up, right? And it's not for a lack of investment. Vita Vea, former first-round pick. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, former first-round pick. Shaq Barrett got a big deal. Anthony Nelson got re-signed. Just got Kalijah Kancey, first-round pick. Just, guys, Yaya Diaby's a third-round pick. Like, it's not for a lack of investment. It's just more so guys need to step up. And, again, this is why a game like this is so important, is if you can get some pressure on CJ Stroud, really make him make some bad decisions as a rookie quarterback, you're only helping the case here. So I think pass rush is going to be huge, exactly what you were saying. With Logan Hall being out, that certainly doesn't really help the case, but maybe that means a guy like Kalijah Kancey can step up.
Yeah, and just to put even more emphasis on getting pressure on CJ Stroud with just 4 down linemen, I mentioned it before, I'll say it again. CJ Stroud so far this season when he is blitzed, a 66.7 completion percentage, 9.3 yards per attempt in passing, and 3 touchdowns. I believe a couple hundred passing yards in there as well. The Bucs cannot just expect to get home with a blitz this week. I mean, they haven't been able to expect that the last few weeks because they haven't been getting home with anything. I mean, Todd Bowles, some weeks he's not as crazy about the blitz, but even when he's sending guys like Levante David and Devin White at the quarterback, they're not always getting there. I can't imagine the last time I saw a Bucs linebacker hit the QB was Levante David taking down Jared Goff in that creamsicle game a few weeks ago. Since then, I'm racking my brain trying to think of any other time I've seen either 54 or 45 actually get to, the opposing team's quarterback, and I cannot think of it. So not only is Stroud good against the blitz, but he's one of those guys who is athletic enough to potentially burn you with his legs. And that's going to come down on the linebackers. That's going to come down on a lot of these guys looking to set the edge. I don't know what the run game is going to look like for Houston this week because, again, they are down Dameon Pierce. So Devin Singletary is a capable backup. He's a guy who has given the Bucs fits in the past, so I am a little worried about that. But realistically, pressure is going to be the big difference maker this week. If you give CJ Stroud as much time as you gave Josh Allen, Jared Goff, even though he's a rookie QB, this could be a long afternoon.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. First and foremost, you gotta get pressure, and I know Todd Bowles loves to blitz, right? Like that's just kind of been his MO. But like you also got to be able to get pressure whenever you're not blitzing. Otherwise, you're just putting your defense in bad situations. Christian Izien is also going to be questionable for this game with an illness, so that's certainly notable. He's been playing very well for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers throughout the first half, so like that's also another reason. Like, okay, you're going to be putting in another rotational corner. Can you afford to blitz with a little bit of a weakness there in your secondary? I don't know. That's just going to be another point to make there, is to say like, you really got to get pressure without blitzing. Yeah, now's the time.
The defensive philosophy this week from Todd Bowles is going to be interesting because he has shown he's good enough to make some adjustments, and I think this week the Bucs are going to have to. If you play as much soft zone as you have these last couple of weeks and just don't get any pressure on the QB, it could be a long afternoon, like I have been saying. Let's talk about the other side of the football for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We talked about Matt Filer not playing at that left guard position, so Aaron Stinney going to get his second start of the 2023 NFL season. He didn't look awful last week, but really, I mean, the offensive line didn't look great as a unit last week, so it's hard to put too much pressure on one guy or the other. Tristan Wirfs seemingly back at full strength after having a scary brush in a couple of weeks ago during that game. I was worried, and I was even more worried when I saw Tristan Wirfs trying to play through the pain, because we have seen him do that in the postseason before, and it ultimately ended his season.
Yeah, I was worried. I was definitely worried whenever you see a guy go into the blue medical tent. It's like, what's happening here? Like, is everything okay with Tristan Wirfs? But it seems like he's okay. And obviously Aaron Stinney filling in for Matt Filer. Rhett, I'm going to be honest, this is why, some people may disagree, but this is the more interesting player out for me than Logan Hall is Matt Filer here. I have an interesting quote because Aaron Stinney, like you said, he didn't play bad last week. And they asked Dave Canales, this is from yesterday, I believe, the second, on how Aaron Stinney did at left guard, and Dave Canal said he played great, had a good couple of runs where he really moved some people and had some power and pass protection. It was his first shot really in there since the preseason to go against some guys and did pretty well. He's got room for improvement there. I love seeing his athleticism, length, and power in the run game. That was really cool. Here is my question to you, Rhett. If Aaron Stinney does good yet again today, or not today, this week versus the Houston Texans, could we see a permanent change there at left guard? Is this an opportunity for Stinney to kind of get a true chance to be the starting left guard moving forward, and maybe you see Matt Filer be benched? The reason I say that is because you take a look at the yards per attempt, and I know Buffalo obviously doesn't have the best rushing defense in the entire league, but that was Rachaad White's best yards per attempt he's had all year. Besides the one game versus Buffalo where he also had 4.3, but Rachaad White, I know, it was only 9 carries as well, so a small sample size, but still 4.3 yards per attempt. That's tied for his best on the season so far. So we've talked about the struggles of the interior line in the past. I mean, it's been a thing all year. The Bucs can't run the football and the interior offensive line can't run block. That's how it's been. You put in Aaron Stinney for one game, looks a little bit better, right? So I do wonder where if Stinney goes in there and has another decent game and the Bucs are able to run the football a little bit better and maybe take control of this game like they haven't been able to in the past. Like, we've seen them try and do against the Saints, the Vikings, and the Bears. Does Aaron Stinney stay in and Matt Filer goes to the bench? What do you think?
I'm glad you brought that up because I brought this hypothetical situation up when we first found out Filer was going to be going down and Stinney coming in. I think Stinney does have what it takes to go in there and play well enough to not give Filer this job back. I honestly think the Bucs have already seen what Filer has put on tape over the first 7-8 weeks of the season, and I think they've moved on. My gut says we're going to be looking for another left guard, whether we promote from within or we get one in the draft or we look at potential free agents after shifting some more guys around on this offensive line. I don't know how they address the potential hole at O-line this coming offseason, but I do think that there is a real shot that, just like you said, Aaron Stinney could play well enough to not give this job back. And I'm glad you brought up the run game as well because it's a great transition point. Last week, for the first time all season, I think, Rachaad White averaged over 4 yards a carry. And if he didn't only get 8 or 9 carries in that game, I think he was on pace to have probably one of his most effective games yet this year running the football. But when you're down 24-10 in the third quarter, you got to stop running the ball so much and start playing catch up. So the Bucs have beaten teams this year with good ball control football, effective running, and defense that plays just well enough for you to win. Maybe forcing a couple of turnovers is going to help too. I do think turnovers are going to be at a premium this game. We'll talk about that here shortly, but I think if Rachaad White comes out in this first half and he looks just as good as he did before they shut him down last week, it is a serious conversation to be had. The improvement from that interior offensive line. Now, there was an interesting stat, though, and we talk about the lack of run game, and we have associated it really to a little bit of everything. Like, it's a little bit of the O-line, it's a little bit of the running backs, it's a little bit of the run scheme and the coordinators. All of that can be true, but here is an interesting, not too great stat about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and their run game. I'm trying to get this pulled up here. I appreciate your patience. Apologies. But it's just about the effectiveness of this run game and the percentage of successful hits. Here, hold on. Let me find it. Stand by. I want to make sure I get the correct information. I know I'm leaving you hanging here. I apologize that this is taking so long. All right. How often teams do not run into their intended run gap and their rushing success rate when that happens? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have 22 rushes where the runner does not run into the gap they're supposed to, and they have had an unsuccessful rushing attempt on every single play, which is the lowest percentage in the NFL. But not just that, it is the lowest percentage in the NFL by quite an impressive margin. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are at 0% success rate when running not into the intended gap. The next closest team are the Kansas City Chiefs, pretty much right next to the Atlanta Falcons at around 14% whenever the running back does not hit the correct gap. So I think for Rachaad White, vision this week is going to be important, and maybe he's been lacking vision with Filer in there these last couple of weeks. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but the proof is in the pudding. Last week was one of the most effective games he has had running the football. And Chase Edmonds coming back for another week in a row off of IR, hopefully filling in at the running back 2 spot. I hope he gets his healthy amount of carries this week, at least 4 or 5 for the boy. But if they can get that run game rolling in the first half this week, I think it definitely changes up what their offensive approach is going to be, knowing that you can start to rely on the run game a little bit more, which has been something that we haven't been able to say at all this season. Maybe the first 2 weeks of the year, and aside from that, you could rely on the run game, but we were still asking for a little bit more. But all in all, back to what you said, I think that's a great point, that Aaron Stinnie could potentially come in here. He has starting experience. I know the Super Bowl season was over 3 years ago now, but he still has starting experience, and he's been good so far. So these next couple of weeks are going to be telling, but I think this is Stinnie's job until he loses it.
Yeah, you just said something that was so interesting to me. It was the vision thing with Rachaad White. Do you remember whenever Jameis had LASIK? And we were all like, this is it. He's going to be good now.
It's the turning point. Are you saying Rachaad White might need some corrective eye surgery?
Is that just what all the running backs need at this point? Like, I don't know. Like, it's funny, right? Like, it's weird. It's like, how do you explain away, or how do you make an analytical point of, and they just can't see? Like, I don't know the fix for that, man. But it is interesting, like you said.
And Rachaad White's not a small back either. He's no Deuce Vaughn back there, so it's not like he can't see as well as most of these other effective backs in the NFL.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what the fix is for that. Maybe it's just getting guys in. Maybe it's just some that fixes itself. I don't know, man. It's weird though. Yeah, but like you said, like what we just talked about, maybe Aaron Stinnie. I think he has a legitimate chance to be that guy moving forward, just because with the struggles of this interior offensive line with run blocking and whatnot, we've talked about it before. That's what this team wants to be, is a run first team, a team that, can really be balanced and whatnot. And you just brought in a guy who just gave Rachaad White his best yards per attempt, tied for his best yards per attempt this year. Maybe you keep on rolling with that guy. It's definitely a possibility. So we'll see, man. But yeah, big opportunity for Stinnie for sure.
One more matchup in the trenches here I want to talk about, and our moderator Willie Beeman brought it up. But that is Luke Gedeke at the right tackle position, or Tristan Wirfs at the left tackle position, wherever they decide to line him up. But the matchup between Will Anderson Jr. and whoever he's going to be shadowing on Sunday afternoon. Now, Will Anderson Jr., for being a top draft pick, has been a little underwhelming as a pass rusher. Only 1 sack so far on the season, but that does not mean he can't take your lunch money. We've talked before about the development of these pass rushers and how sometimes it's going to take a little bit longer. It's going to take 2 to 3 seasons maybe to see the full extent of that guy's tool set, what he's capable of. And Anderson has put some good on film so far for the Texans this year, but it just hasn't resulted in sacks. But I do think that this isn't the most formidable defensive line, especially after the last couple of weeks the Bucs have faced. But I do think it is going to be a good test for Luke Gedeke, who's looking to bounce back. I think he played okay last week, but this interior especially, Ed Oliver was having a field day with the interior offensive line last week. Cody Mauch going to be looking to bounce back. Robert Hainsey as well. And then, of course, Aaron Stinnie making his second straight start there at the left guard position. But along this Texans defensive line, you got Will Anderson at left defensive end, Dylan Horton, the rotational player behind him, Malik Collins at D tackle. Former Buccaneers draft pick Khalil Davis is a rotational D lineman for the Houston Texans. Sheldon Rankins, their probably biggest name D tackle, is questionable headed into this matchup. I want to assume he plays, but you never really know. Kurt Heinisch also on there as well. Jonathan Greener, Jerry Hughes, Denzel Perryman at the Mike linebacker position, Shaquille Griffin at corner, Jimmy Ward at safety, Jalen Petre at safety, and Steven Nelson rounding out that other cornerback spot. So the names might not be there, but it doesn't mean you can get cute with the offensive game plan this week. I think realistically, you can't underestimate any team at this point in the season with an offense that has been as underwhelming as the Bucs has so far this season. But when you look at Dave Canales, James, and you look at maybe what he brings to the game plan this week, I know we just talked a lot about the run game, but what else are you looking for from Big Dave looking to bounce back?
Yeah, well, firstly, I want to talk about Jonathan Greenard. Homie's been kind of going crazy. He's got 6 sacks so far this year and through 7 games. He's coming off of a 2.5 sack game that he had versus the Carolina Panthers on October 29th versus, they lost that game. But still, it's basically been Jonathan Greenard and then everybody else. Which has been interesting. So that is one guy that I would definitely keep an eye out for. Like what you said, like Will Anderson's an interesting guy. He's the 3rd overall pick in the most recent NFL draft. CJ Stroud was the 2nd overall pick. It's going to be some interesting matchups for Tunsil and Gedeke at the tackle positions and whatnot. What to see from Dave Canales? There's been a lot of talk about not rolling out Baker, and that's been successful for the Bucs recently. I'm not a super big, X's and O's guys like that, in terms to say like, hey, what works in what situations and what doesn't. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not that smart, but it's still, if it works, that's going to be one thing to definitely look to do more. What an interesting dynamic, right? Like where Dave Canales has said, like, hey, we still want to run the football. And then you've got your quarterback saying, hey, we're not a run first team, guys. It's like, what a weird duality, right? Of what are we talking about here? So I and there's even been some talk about them trying their own version of the quarterback sneak. I don't care what anybody says with a new name. It's not called the tush push. It's called the quarterback sneak.
It's the brotherly shove.
Huh?
It's the brotherly
shove. No, yeah. It's the quarterback sneak. All right. They've been trying their own stuff with that, and I don't know, man. I mean, I think their goal is to still try and run the football well and do some play action-y type of stuff. I think that's going to be what you're gonna try and see from the Bucs in this upcoming game, and obviously getting Mike Evans and Chris Godwin involved. And we'll just see if all the different types of stuff that they've been trying are going to be working. Maybe they will run the football more now that Aaron Stinney's been in there. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
I know special teams isn't something that gets too much attention here on the show unless we're talking about a field goal kicker or maybe the return game. But special teams this week is going to be a lot more important than it has in seasons past, because I don't know if a lot of people have noticed this, but the Buccaneers have had 11 drives this season start inside their own 10-yard line, which is tied with the Cardinals for the most in the NFL. They have scored one of those 11 drives, and they got a touchdown. The defense has had opponents start 7 drives inside their 10 with a touchdown and field goal from those same situations. So not only is fielding punts going to be important, which I can't believe I've said that, but you're going to have to get better with your field position this week. You cannot expect an offense that can barely do anything to begin with to go march 90-plus yards down the field every single time you give them the football. But we talked about the effectiveness of the run game and obviously expectations for Dave Canales this week. Wanted to get some more thoughts on Baker Mayfield and where you think he is so far, because a lot of people think the clock is ticking for Baker. And I think, if he plays 2 or 3 more bad games, then obviously we're going to have the discussion about benching him. But I do think people think his leash is shorter than it really is. I had seen a lot of discourse today on the Twitter app, as you normally do, and that's always good, especially when you got, Buccaneers beat writers getting angry with fans. That's always entertaining. But, talking about Baker so far this season, it's hard to say that he has been great, but it's also hard for me to say that he has been just god-awful. Like I think a lot of the ways that this offense has come up short so far this season, part of it is because Baker simply has to play better. We have talked ad nauseum these last couple of weeks just about all the things that could be better and should be better on this Buccaneers offense. But Baker Mayfield, I feel like if you give him a run game this week, he's going to bounce back and he's going to play well, and he's going to have a lot more people talking about the upside that he brings to this team. I think realistically, a lot of people, tempering expectations has been a hot topic this year as well. A lot of people had to come to terms with the fact that the Bucs probably weren't going to win a Super Bowl this year. That was breaking news to a lot of people after week 7. But yeah, the spot that they were in, $56 million over the cap to start the offseason. You got to make all of these strategic moves to field a team, and it's a team that a lot of people thought this year was only going to win 1 or 2 games. Not a lot of people around here, don't get me wrong. Nobody on this podcast said the Bucs were going to be 2-15 this year. But a lot of the media thought they were going to be a top 5 bottom team in the NFL. And now we're talking about them winning enough games this year to get a draft pick in the first round for 2024 that isn't really going to help him. So going back to Baker, I really do think that he needs to be better, but do you get the feeling that I do in where it's like, I think he's farther away than people think he is to potentially winding up on the bench still?
So I'm so happy you brought this up, because this has been something that I've been thinking a lot about, and I've heard the opinions, right? I don't know who was popping off on Twitter today, by the way, for the media. Was it Stroud?
It was
probably Stroud.
Yeah, it was Rick Stroud and Greg Allman were really giving it to some people today.
Now, what was their point? Were they saying that Baker hasn't been doing as bad as people think that he's been doing? Or
they talked about everything from Todd Bowles' mentality in the locker room to Baker Mayfield not necessarily being the guy. Rick Stroud in particular, I mean,
was going crazy.
Oh my God, dude! I seriously, like he said, Baker Mayfield for $4 million is probably the best thing they could have done. Neither Garoppolo or Derek Carr, who cost a ton more, have winning records or performances right now, which is a fantastic point. I don't know. Here we go. So someone else had told Stroud, if only Todd Bowles had the greatest QB of all time, he would know if he was good. Wait, he went under 500 with that quarterback. And Rick Stroud said that 45-year-old GOAT who lost 20 pounds in a starting center and needed 5 fourth quarter or OT wins to reach the playoffs. Did you know that both running backs from that team were out of the NFL until Lenny was signed to the Bills practice squad? I'm muting you. Your 15 minutes are up. And then someone else replied, and they said, Todd Bowles will be fired before the end of next season. I'll refer to this tweet when you write up your article. And then Stroud responds and says, I don't know if he will be or not, and it's not my concern or my call. But if you were telling me after winning a Super Bowl and back-to-back division titles, you expect a ton better in the first 7 weeks from this team that started $56 million over the cap, you are delusional. And I do not like to support Rick Stroud that often because he has done a lot of wrong in the past, and he's definitely not the best Bucs beat writer we have, but I mean, he was making point after point today. And I really think as far as tempering expectations with this team, we can be upset that they're not as good as we want them to be. We can be upset that they're bad. But I think context is important. And just like Rick Stroud said right there, I think this Bucs team is far, far better than where a lot of people had them pegged so far this season.
Yeah, so let's just kind of talk about this, right? Like kind of more in depth. I'm happy you brought it up because I've heard people say, and I agree, you put it perfectly. People think Baker's leash is shorter than what it really is, right? I think the Bucs have been very satisfied. This is my opinion. It is subjective. I think the Bucs have been satisfied in some way, happy in some way with how Baker has been doing. Because if you hear the coaching staff talk, what is Dave Canales and Todd Bowles been talking about so often? They can't run the football, right? And I feel like they think that is a way bigger deal to why the offense is not successful than Baker Mayfield. I think that they feel that Baker Mayfield is doing enough to win football games. I think that if I had to guess the mindset of the coaching staff, they think the running game's the biggest issue right now. They probably feel that Baker is far from the furthest issue right now on this offense.
And I just want to reiterate, Baker does have to be better. The shortcomings of this offense, he plays a hand in. Like, there have been multiple throws that he should have made. There's just been some off-target issues. There have been some issues with hanging onto the football for too long, taking an unnecessary sack, or just, not trying to make a play in a position where you should be trying to make a play, especially at the end of the game when you've only got a couple of minutes to win. So Baker has not been perfect. But just like Stroud says here, given what's in front of him, his fourth team in 16 months, first-time play caller, and offensive line issues, I think he's been okay. And I definitely don't think he's as close to being benched as a lot of people would like to believe. I think, just like Evan has said before, if the Bucs eventually turn over to Kyle Trask, this season is over. I mean, by the time we see Kyle Trask come in the regular season, unless it's injury, this season is probably long over by the time we finally get to that point.
Yeah, I think that Baker's been playing fine so far this year. And I agree. And I will say that I does Baker need to play better? Yes. Is Baker the worst part about this offense right now? No. No, he is not. They have a league worst rushing attack, and it's just not even close, right? The offensive line has not been great so far this year in terms of run blocking, and a little bit in pass blocking as well, in terms of the interior offensive line and whatnot. Now, does Baker get a lot of passes batted down at the defensive line of scrimmage? Yes. Does he miss some throws on deep balls to guys like Trey Palmer and whatnot? Yes. But I think that I would agree, and maybe some people will agree, maybe some people will disagree, that I don't think Baker is benchable right now. He's not playing that bad, folks. 10 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He's not turning the ball over. And he's doing enough to, still go out there and play some decent football. Now, again, he's not playing great, but I don't think he's playing terrible either. He's playing okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. The box score, the stats so far, you just talked about the touchdown interception ratio, 10 TDs to 4 picks so far on the season, over 1,000 yards passing. I do think it is a little deceptive because I don't think he's quite been as good as one would think when they hear that stat line.
Yeah, like if you look at his stat line, you see 64 completion percentage, 1,600 yards, 10 touchdowns, 4 picks. Only sacked however many times he's been sacked. He's only been sacked 11 times this year.
Yeah.
You would sit there and think like that's not a bad year from Baker, but like it's definitely been like for sure mediocre.
Yeah. I think when you look at that stat line, your first thought isn't this team is averaging 17 points per game. And that's going to be the final issue we talk about before we get into our score predictions here. Is the scoring offense. Red zone offense has obviously been a struggle for the Bucs when they can get there. We talked about the run game, the offensive line, both of those looking to bounce back this week and ultimately create more opportunities. I think this is a week where the Bucs have a legitimate chance for things to just play into their favor for once. These last couple of weeks, it seems like whenever things can go wrong, they usually do, and the Bucs have lost to better teams. Now, I think the Houston Texans are a good team. I haven't watched a lot of the Houston Texans this season. I'll be honest with you. I haven't watched them every week. So I could be wrong. We could get a bunch of angry Texans fans in the comment section when I say the following comment. But I think the Texans are good. I think when the Bucs have played their best ball this year, I don't think the Texans are better. I think the Bucs have a better group of players at their core. I think they have more experience, which is going to help them in the long run. I think this is a defense that can force takeaways, even though the turnover differential in this game is going to be kind of crazy. The Bucs with the NFL's best turnover differential. And the Texans, I believe, not very notorious for turning the ball over. I should have a better stat for you here in a second, courtesy of Greg Allman. But let me see. Sorry this is taking so long. I should probably have these ready to go whenever I tease stats. That way I can just read them and not have to sound like an idiot while I scramble and look them up. So turnovers are going to be hard to come by, and Bucs Texans on Sunday. Houston, impressively, has an NFL low 4 turnovers all season long, despite a rookie quarterback, while Tampa Bay is tied for second fewest with 6 in 7 games. The Bucs have the league's best turnover margin at +8. The Texans are at +5. So protecting the football is already going to be number one on everybody's to-do list this week, especially for Tampa Bay. Cleaning up that discipline is going to be something else. We have not talked about that, but Jesus Christ, you have got to stop getting 10 false start penalties a game. We just can't do it.
No,
we cannot do it and win football games.
No, and that's also one of the reasons why the offense hasn't been effective. Has been all the freaking penalties, red holdings, false starts. It's been so frustrating to see.
I gotta think, not to cut you off here, but I gotta think based off of, and I'm sure that there is a stat like this somewhere. I don't think I'm gonna find it in time, but I have to think based off of just the plays that have come back for this Buccaneers offense due to a holding or due to a false start, the Bucs probably lead some sort of category about like the most yards taken away because of penalties. Like it seems like every single time these last few weeks, the offense finally finds some momentum. They get that big 10, 15, 20-yard play down the field. Oh, holding. Left guard. Number 64. Replay second down.
Yeah. No, I know. It's been... I know a lot of Bucs fans are frustrated with it. I understand it completely. Trust me, I hear it. You also look, I mean, it's just frustrating, man. It just is. They got to stop getting drive killing penalties. Have definitely got to do better with that because then you'll also see some changes in the offense as well.
All right, so let's get into some score predictions for this week's game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road playing at 1 o'clock once again. The white on white uniforms, everybody's favorite kit. What do you think, James? I don't see a lot of fireworks happening between these teams, and that's simply because of the turnover differential. Now, this could be a trap game. This could be an anomaly game. You know, both of these teams come in with some of the best turnover differentials in the league, and somehow they both walk out this Sunday with 3+ turnovers. I don't quite think that happens, but I do think the Bucs come out on top, and I have been sticking with my low score predictions, and I'm going to do it for another week in a row because we just talked about this offense averaging 17 points per game. I don't know if this week is going to be the week where they get over 28 points even. That would be quite the anomaly so far. But I do think the Bucs win. It's a tough road win. You're looking to avoid losing 4 in a row after a 3-1 start. I think the Bucs are a little bit better than what their record shows. And it's hard to say that because in the NFL, you are what your record says you are, and the Bucs have lost to better teams. But I think they bounce back this week. I think they get right. I've got the Buccaneers coming out on top. I've used this score prediction before. I'll use it again. 21-17. I think this is a close game. I think at times it is frustrating. But if the run game gets going this week and Aaron Stinney looks good for another week in a row, if you can keep those yards per carry up for a guy like Rachaad White and keep those legs fresh and healthy headed into the end of this game, I think the Bucs go back to what worked before. You know, when they were beating teams like New Orleans and Chicago, Minnesota early in the season, they were doing it by running the football, controlling the clock, and playing some suffocating defense. And the pass rush is going to be questionable, but I do think they have the talent to come away with a few takeaways this week. What do you think, James?
I'm going to give the Bucs a win here, 24-20. I think the offense can get going a little bit. Obviously, the Texans having a couple of guys out is not great. And I just think it's going to be a little bit of a low scoring game. Two pretty decent offenses that don't turn over the ball is going to be, a fun thing to watch. And I think that you're just going to get a pretty solid game out of both these teams that are both, trying to get back to 500 football. And I just give the Buccaneers the edge here, just barely.
Looking to get back into the NFC South race. Big game against the Texans this week. Looking to get them right. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. This week's game preview episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Excuse me. Follow the show on social media. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Subscribe to us here on YouTube for more great Tampa Bay Buccaneers content. I haven't officially announced it, but whenever Evan comes back off of his suspension, I think he'll be bringing some new and exclusive content here to the Cannon Fire Podcast YouTube channel. Also, let us know what you guys think about the new looks, new digs. We've had the same show layout for literally like 5 seasons, I think, ever since we started doing video. So we tried to clean it up, change some things, maybe some more changes to come. Who knows? But always appreciate the feedback. Follow my co-host, James, on social media at Mr. Bucs Nation, and you can check out his video work here on YouTube at Mr. Bucs Nation. What have you got cooking this week?
Yeah, I just did a video today regarding the injury report for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to have a preview out tomorrow and then got my game live stream on Sunday. So that should be a lot of fun. Also, the next day, I'm going to be doing a show with Bleacher Report just kind of going over some stuff as well. So if you guys want, go download the Bleacher Report app so you can watch that live stream as well. It's got a lot of different content coming out.
That Bleacher Report stream you said will be on Monday, correct?
As far as I know, yes. I'll have to check the email, but I believe it's on Monday.
So can I tell the people now
that we're doing something afterwards?
That you're going to be joining us Sunday after the game, live right here, youtube.com/Canonfire Podcast?
Yes, I should be able to make it.
Awesome. I cannot wait. That's the show, folks. Thank you again for listening. We'll talk to you Sunday after the game right here, youtube.com/Canonfire Podcast. Win, lose, or draw, we will be live and taking your calls on the Cannon Fire hotline. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, James Hill. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.